Of liars. There is no man who has less business talking about memory, for I recognize almost no trace of it in me, and I do not think there is another one in the world so monstrously deficient. All my other faculties are low and common, but in this one I think I am singular and very rare, and thereby worthy of gaining a name and reputation. Besides the natural inconvenience that I suffer by this, if in part of the country they want to say that a man has no sense, they say he has no memory. And when I complain of the defectiveness of mine, they argue with me and do not believe me, as if I were accusing myself of witlessness. They see no distinction between memory and understanding. This makes me look a lot worse than I am. But they do me wrong, for rather the opposite is seen by experience, that excellent memories are prone to be joined to feeble judgments. They do me wrong also in this, I who know how to do nothing so well as be a friend, that by the very words they use to denounce my malady, they also make me look ungrateful. They blame my feelings for my want of memory, and of a natural lack they make a lack of conscience. He has forgotten, they say, this request or that promise. He does not remember his friends. He did not remember to say or do or be silent about such and such a thing for my sake. Certainly I may easily forget, but careless about the charge with which my friend has entrusted me, that I am not. Let them be content with my infirmity, without making it into a sort of malice, and a malice so alien to my nature. I have some consolation, first because my speech is the briefer for it. For the magazine of memory is apt to be better furnished with matter than that of invention. This is a pity. I see it confirmed by the example of some of my close friends, to the extent that memory supplies them with the thing as present and entire. They push their narrative so far back and load it with such pointless circumstances, that if the story is good, they smother its goodness. If it is not, you are left cursing either the felicity of their memory or the infelicity of their judgment. My second consolation is that I remember injuries received less, as that ancient said, and the places and books that I visit always smile at me with a fresh newness. It is not unreasonably said that anyone who does not feel sufficiently strong in memory should not meddle with lying. I know very well that the grammarians make this distinction between telling a lie and lying, that telling a lie means saying something false, but which we have taken for true, and that lying, as defined in Latin, from which our French is taken, implies going against our conscience, and thus applies only to those who say what is contrary to what they know, those of whom I am speaking. Now, liars either invent everything out of whole cloth, or else disguise and alter something fundamentally true. When they disguise and change a story, if you put them back onto it often enough, they find it hard not to get tangled up. For since the thing as it has become lodged first in the memory, and has imprinted itself there by way of consciousness and knowledge, it is difficult for it not to present itself to the imagination, dislodging the falsehood, which cannot have so firm and secure a foothold. Likewise, the circumstances that were learned first, slipping into the mind every moment, tend to weaken the memory of the false or corrupted parts that have been added, in what liars invent completely, inasmuch as there is no contrary impression which clashes with the falsehood, they seem to have the less reason to fear making a mistake. Nevertheless, even this, since it is an empty thing without a grip, is prone to escape any but a very strong memory. I have often seen the proof of this, and amusingly, at the expense of those who make a profession of fashioning their words only to suit the affairs they are negotiating and to please the great to whom they are speaking. For these circumstances to which they are willing to enslave their honor and their conscience, being subject to many changes, their words must vary accordingly, whence it happens that they describe the same thing as now gray, now yellow, to one man one way, to another another. And if by chance these men compare notes on such contrary reports, what becomes of this fine art? Let alone the fact that so often they imprudently entangle themselves, for what memory could suffice them to remember all the many different shapes into which they have cast the same subject? I have seen many in my time envy someone's reputation for this fine sort of prudence, who do not see that if the reputation is there, the effect cannot be. King Francis I boasted that he had trapped by this means Francesco Taverna, ambassador of Francesco Sforza, Duke of Milan, a man very famous for skill in talking. This man had been dispatched to present his master's excuses to his Majesty about a matter of great consequence, which was this: the king, in order to maintain some intelligence service in Italy, from which he had lately been driven out, and especially in the Duchy of Milan, had decided to keep one of his own gentlemen near the Duke, an ambassador, in effect, but in appearance a private person, who pretended to be there for his personal affairs, inasmuch as the Duke, who had grown increasingly dependent on the Emperor, especially at that time when he was negotiating a marriage with his niece, daughter of the King of Denmark, now Dowager of Lorraine, could not openly deal or confer with us without great damage to himself. For this commission, a Milanese gentleman named Merville, inquiry to the king was found suitable, dispatched with secret credentials and instructions as ambassador, and with other letters of recommendation to the Duke regarding his personal affairs for mask and show. This man stayed so long with the Duke that some inkling of it came to the Emperor, who, so we think, brought about what followed after, which was that on the pretext of some murder, the Duke goes and has his head cut off one fine night, with his trial completed in 2 days. Sir Francesco, having come ready with a long counterfeit account of this affair, for the king had addressed himself to demand satisfaction to all the princes of Christendom and to the Duke himself, was heard during the morning's business. After he had established as the basis of this case, and prepared to that end several plausible explanations of the fact that his master had never taken our man for anything but a private gentleman and subject of his own, who had come to do business in Milan, and had never lived there in any other guise, denying even having known that he was in the service of the king's household or known to him, so far was he from taking him for an ambassador. The king, in his turn, pressing him with various objections and questions and attacking him from all sides, finally cornered him on the matter of the execution performed by night, and as it were by stealth, to which the poor man, embarrassed, answered, to play the honest man, that out of respect for his Majesty the Duke would have been very reluctant to have such an execution performed by day. Anyone may imagine how he was picked up for having contradicted himself so clumsily, and that for such a nose as that of King Francis. Pope Julius II sent an ambassador to the King of England to incite him against the French king. When the ambassador had had his audience, and the King of England had dwelt in his reply on the difficulties he found in making the preparations that would be needed to combat so powerful a king, and stated some of the reasons for those difficulties, the ambassador inappropriately replied that he, for his part, had also considered them, and indeed had mentioned them to the Pope. From this speech, so far removed from his mission, which was to urge him headlong into war, the King of England got the first inkling of what he later actually found out, that this ambassador, in his private intent, leaned toward the side of France, and when the man's master had been informed of this, the man's goods were confiscated, and he barely avoided losing his life.